Happy 4th of July!
Court day was not a dramatic movie-style trial. This wasn't a case of he said, she said.
Look at those burgers.
This was a case of we have everything on video, in emails, and certified by a surveyor, my lawyer. A sharp woman named Maria Flores had filed for a summary judgment in my civil suit against Karen. Hail, in the HOA. It's a legal move that basically says, Your Honor, the evidence is so overwhelming that there's no need for a full trial. Let's just get to the verdict. The courtroom was quiet and formal, all dark wood and high ceilings. I wore a simple suit. Karen Lawson, and what was left of the HOA board, sat on the other side of the room. She wouldn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, her face a pale, tight mask of resentment. Rob Hale was there too, looking small and lost without his hammer. Maria was brilliant. She didn't use emotion. She used facts. She presented the case like a builder laying a foundation, one solid block of evidence at a time. She started with the deed and the original 1946 plat. This is the property, Your Honor, unchanged for nearly 80 years. Then she presented Evan Pike's certified survey, showing the court exactly where the true line was. The centerpiece of our presentation was a huge mounted display board. On it, we had an oversized aerial photograph of my property. Maria took 2 long pieces of colored yarn. One was pink. She pinned it to the photo, tracing the true legal boundary line. This, Your Honor, is the line according to the law. Then she took a piece of yellow yarn. She pinned it along the fraudulent line, the one Hale had been trying to create. And this, she said, her voice ringing with contempt, is the line according to Karen Lawson's boundary project? The visual was devastating. The yellow line sliced off my entire waterfront. The judge, a no-nonsense older woman named Judge Carmichael, stared at the map for a long time. She then looked over her glasses at Karen's lawyer, a flustered man who seemed to know he was on a sinking ship. He tried to argue. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, a simple dispute over interpretation of the high-water mark. He said the emails were taken out of context. He said Rob Hale was just an overzealous employee. It was weak. It was pathetic. Judge Carmichael was not impressed. Counselor, she said, her voice dripping with ice, are you asking this court to believe that your client coincidentally and contextually sent emails with the subject line Boundary Project, while her employee was coincidentally and contextually trespassing with a fraudulent survey marker and a hammer? Do you take this court for a fool? The lawyer mumbled something and sat down next. Maria submitted the chain of evidence from the sheriff's department, the photos of the nails, the lab report on the bleach, the hammer, the string, and the spray paint, all in evidence bags, and finally, the infrared video. We played it on the courtroom monitors. The whole room watched Rob Hale swing that hammer. The judge didn't even look at the screen. She looked at Rob Hale. He shrank in his chair. When the video was over, the courtroom was silent. Judge Carmichael took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked at Karen Lawson. Ma'am, for a few feet of shoreline, you have managed to orchestrate a campaign of harassment, vandalism, fraud, and assault. You have abused your position of trust in your community and exposed your homeowner's association to massive liability. The ruling was swift. Summary judgment was granted in my favor. The court declared the boundary line to be exactly where Evan Pike's survey showed it. Karen Lawson and Rob Hale were found jointly liable for damages, which included the cost of Evan's survey, my legal fees, and the cost to repair my dock and trail. The HOA was also found liable. Hale was acting as their agent, but the judge didn't stop there. Due to the overwhelming evidence of deliberate and coordinated fraud, she announced, I am referring this entire matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. A gasp went through the room. It was no longer just about money. It was about potential jail time. The gavel came down with a sharp final crack. It was over. We had won, completely and unequivocally, walking out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine. I didn't feel anger or even joy. I felt the quiet, profound satisfaction of seeing a wrong made right. The truth, backed by proof, had prevailed. A month has passed since the court date. The lake has settled back into its quiet rhythm. The autumn leaves are starting to turn, painting the shoreline in shades of gold and red. The air is crisp, and the water is clear. Things are different now, but in a good way. The HOA, under new leadership, sent me a check for the full amount of the damages, along with a formal, written apology. Karen Lawson and Rob Hale are awaiting their criminal trial. I hear she sold her house and moved away. She couldn't face the neighbors she had tried to cheat. Her reign of petty tyranny was over, but I knew that wasn't enough. A legal victory is just paper. I needed something permanent, something real. This past weekend, Evan Pike and Nate came over. We didn't have a picnic. We had work to do. We spent the day installing new boundary markers. These aren't just wooden stakes. They are 4-inch thick granite posts set 3 feet deep in concrete. They are solid, permanent, and unambiguous, at the corner by the old oak tree. Right next to the original iron axle my grandpa relied on, we placed the most important one. It's a bit taller than the others. Set into the top of it is a round brass plaque. I had it custom made. It's engraved with the official survey coordinates, the date, Evan Pike's surveyor license number, and at the bottom, the court case number from our victory. It's a statement. It says, "This line is not a suggestion. It is a fact, recorded in stone and backed by the full force of the law." It says, "This far and no further." My grandpa taught me that a man has to know where his lines are, not just on a map, but in his life. He has to know what he stands for and what he won't stand for. This whole ordeal wasn't just about a strip of land. It was about that principle. It was about defending my home, my peace, my grandpa's legacy from someone who thought she could just take it because she wanted it. It was about standing up to a bully. Not with fists or with anger, but with facts and with the truth. It was a hard fight and a stressful one. It cost me time and peace of mind. But standing here now, looking at this solid granite post, I know it was worth it. The bleach stains on the dock have faded, and I've restained the wood. The trail is clear of nails. The fake survey pin is long gone, logged into a police evidence locker. The only line that matters now is the true one, marked forever in stone. The lake is quiet. My home is secure. The fight is over, so here is my final thought. My call to action for anyone watching, for anyone who has ever faced a bully who tried to take what is rightfully yours: know your rights. Understand your property lines, your deeds, your contracts. Document everything. Take pictures. Save emails. When someone tries to intimidate you, don't meet their anger with your own. Meet it with calm, cold, undeniable proof. The law can be a powerful shield, but you have to be the one to pick it up and wield it. Never, ever let someone steal your peace. Defend your own as far as it takes, because in the end, that's what a home is. It's the place where your lines are drawn and the ground you will never surrender. I looked directly at Karen Lawson. Her arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a cold, stark panic. She was exposed. Her power, built on a foundation of lies and bullying, had just crumbled into dust. "The sheriff's department has copies of all of this," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "So does the game warden. So does my lawyer. This isn't a boundary dispute anymore. It's a criminal investigation, and you, President Lawson, are at the center of it." I packed up my projector, nodded to the stunned board members, and walked out of the room. Leaving the shambles of her little empire behind me, the showdown was over. The fallout was about to begin. The morning after the HOA meeting, the system began to move. The emails were the key. They provided what the law calls mens rea, the guilty mind. They proved intent. They connected Karen Lawson directly to the criminal acts committed by Rob Hale. Deputy Miller called me around. 8 a.m., we've got the warrant, he said. The DA reviewed the emails and video overnight and greenlit probable cause. The judge signed. It's all coming together. The wheels of justice can grind slowly. But when they have enough grease, they move with undeniable force. Our evidence of videos, the survey, the witness statements, and now the emails was more than enough grease. Around mid-morning, I saw the official vehicles roll into the neighborhood. 2 sheriff's cars and Dana Ruiz's Greene County truck. They didn't use their sirens. This wasn't a raid for a violent fugitive. It was a quiet, methodical seizure of evidence. They went to Karen Lawson's house first. I didn't watch from my window. I just sat on my porch with a cup of coffee. I could imagine the scene, the knock on the door, the presentation of the search warrant, the look on her face as officers came into her home, her personal kingdom, to search for evidence of her crimes. They would take her computer, her phone, any documents related to the Boundary Project. They were dismantling her operation piece by piece. From there, they went to Rob Hale's house. He was just a tool, but he was a willing one. They seized his computer as well, and in his shed. They found a partial box of the same brand of roofing nails that I had found on my trail. They also found several more of the generic orange survey caps. It was a perfect match. The physical evidence was now linked directly to him, and his electronic communications were linked directly to Karen. The circle was complete. There was no escape. Dana Ruiz's role was specific. She was there for the environmental crimes. Her citation wasn't just for the bleach poured on my dock. With the evidence from the emails, she could now cite the HOA itself, funder Karen's direction for conspiracy to pollute state waters. She wrote the citation to the association as the responsible party, listing its president of record as the agent in charge. It was a bigger charge with steeper fines. Later that afternoon, Dana stopped by my place. She looked tired, but satisfied. "We got it all," she said. "Computers, phones, paperwork. The DA is going to have a field day with this. They're being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, felony trespass, vandalism, and I've written the citations for the environmental violations. Hale gets an additional charge for the assault." She shook her head, looking out at the calm water. All this for a few feet of land. Some people's greed is just bottomless. We stood there for a moment, watching the sun sparkle on the lake. My grandpa always said the lake takes care of itself, but sometimes it needs a little help. We had helped the news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The HOA board convened an emergency session that evening. Karen Lawson was removed as president by a unanimous vote. The other board members, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, pledged their full cooperation with the authorities. They immediately put a freeze on paying any of Karen's legal bills, and they canceled the invoice from Rob Hale for his boundary rectification services. His 30 pieces of silver would go uncollected. Nate came over with a couple of cold drinks. We sat on the dock, the real dock, firmly on my side of the real property line. The ugly bleach stains were still there, a faint reminder of the fight. "You did good, Caleb," he said. It was high praise from him. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a quiet sense of rightness. The system had worked. It was slow, and it required a lot of effort on my part. But when presented with clear, undeniable proof, it did what it was supposed to do. It protected the innocent and held the guilty accountable. Karen Lawson thought she could bend reality to her will. She thought her title and her bluster were enough to take what wasn't hers. But she was wrong. She'd come up against something harder than she was: the law, the truth. And a man who was too stubborn to back down from a fight for his own home. The tools were seized. The citations were written, the charges were filed. The only thing left was our day in court, the final official stamp on a victory that had been won in the dark with a camera and a length of yellow string. In black and white. Later, the warrant let deputies pull the original emails from the server. Headers and timestamps matched the printouts line for line. The HOA meeting was held in a sterile, windowless room in the community clubhouse. The air was thick with cheap coffee and self-importance. Karen sat at the head of a long table, flanked by the other board members, who all looked either bored or sycophantic. The room was filled with about 30 residents. She ran the meeting like a dictator, her voice sharp and condescending. When my turn came, she introduced me with a smirk. "Next, we have Mr. Caleb Morgan, who has some concerns about the community greenbelt." I walked to the front of the room and set up a small projector. I had brought Good evening, I began, my voice calm and steady. I'm not here tonight to talk about concerns. I'm here to present facts. I started with the basics. I showed them the original survey plat from 1946. I explained in simple, third-grade language how my property line was established and recorded. Then I put up a photo of the nails scattered on my trail. A few people in the audience gasped. I showed them the picture of my bleached dock. Then I put up a close-up of the shiny, fake survey pin. This fraudulent marker was placed on my property last week, I said. It was the first step in an illegal scheme to seize a portion of my land. Karen's face was hardening. Mr. Morgan, these are baseless accusations. The HOA has simply been exploring its legal boundaries. I cut her off. I'm not making accusations, Karen. I'm presenting evidence. And then I played the video. Karen lunged for the table, his fingers reaching for the HDMI cable. Nate slid one boot forward, pinning the cord with a quiet scrape. The footage rolled on the wall. Hail, the swing, the string. From the back row, a man stood up. That's my handyman, he said, stunned. Karen, you told us he was marking trees for beetles? Murmurs flickered into open anger. A woman near the door said, We paid for this. The room was silent as the grainy green infrared footage played on the screen. They saw Rob Hale sneaking through the woods. They saw him pull out the hammer. They saw Nate and me confront him. They saw him swing the hammer. An audible shock went through the room. I paused the video on a clear shot of Hale's face. This is Rob Hale, your HOA handyman, committing felony trespass, vandalism, and a hammer attack on my property 2 nights ago. He is currently out on bail. Karen was on her feet, her face flushed with anger. This is an outrage. This is private security footage. It's inadmissible. You have no right. It's my land and my cameras, posted lawfully, I said. The sheriff already logged the files into evidence. Oh, I have the right, I said, my voice dropping. And I have more. That's when I put the first email up on the screen. The one from Karen to Rob? Rob, we need to establish a new marker for the boundary project. Place it 10 feet from the high water line. Per our discussion, we'll claim a VULSION. The room erupted in murmurs. I clicked to the next email, and the next. The instructions, the invoices. The whole sordid plan laid bare for all her neighbors to see. The board members were staring at her. Their faces a mixture of shock and horror. They were implicated. Their president had been running a criminal conspiracy using their names and their money. The final email I showed was from Karen, sent the morning after Hale's arrest. It was to the HOA's lawyer. We have a problem with the boundary project. The neighbor is being difficult. We need to discredit him. I turned off the projector. The room was deathly quiet. Evan Pike, standing by his transit, summed it up perfectly. This, he said, pointing to the yellow string, is not a boundary dispute. This is a crime scene. He then pulled out a copy of the official plat map and held it up. He showed Deputy Miller how the pink line on the ground matched the line on the map perfectly, and how the yellow line was a complete fabrication. We had it all. The testimony of a licensed surveyor, the photographic evidence, the physical demonstration, a witnessing law enforcement officer. The chain of evidence was complete. From Karen Lawson's verbal threat to Rob Hale's hammer, to the undeniable visual proof of their fraudulent stringline cutting. Through my property, they hadn't just tried to move a line. They had tried to rewrite history, and we had just proven in broad daylight that their story was a lie. The only thing left to do was to take this mountain of evidence and drop it right in the middle of Karen. Lawson's world, the fight for the land was over. The fight for justice was about to begin. Armed with Evan's official survey report, Deputy Miller's witness statement, and a folder thick with photographs and videos, I knew a quiet legal filing wouldn't be enough. Karen Lawson's power came from her position as HOA president. She ruled through intimidation and the illusion of authority. To beat her, I had to dismantle that authority in front of the very people she ruled. I had to show them all that the Empress had no clothes. I checked the HOA website. The next monthly board meeting was in 2 days. Perfect. I called the HOA management company and formally requested to be added to the agenda. I was polite, professional, and vague. I simply said I had an important matter of community property to discuss. They agreed. They had no idea what was coming. The day of the meeting, Nate and I found an unexpected ally. A man who lived a few doors down from Karen stopped by my house. He was nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. "I heard what happened to Rob Hale," he whispered. "I'm on the architectural review committee. Karen, she's been running this boundary project for months. She thinks she's being clever." He slid a plain manila envelope across my kitchen table. "She forwards her emails to the committee for review sometimes. She must have forgotten who was on the distribution list. These might help." He was gone as quickly as he had appeared. I opened the envelope. Inside were printouts of a dozen emails between Karen Lawson and Rob Hale. The subject line on every single one was Boundary Project. They detailed the entire plan. The purchase of the rebar and caps, the strategy of claiming erosion, the instructions for Hale to place the pin and run the string line. There was even an invoice from Hale to the HOA for boundary rectification services. It was the smoking gun. A signed confession. By 10 a.m., the fog had burned off. The players were assembled. Evan was there with his transit tripod and survey rods. Deputy Miller came back, this time with a notepad and in an official capacity to witness and report. He wasn't certifying the line, just witnessing the process and logging what we showed him. Dana Ruiz was there too, representing the county's interest in the shoreline. Nate stood beside me, a silent partner in this operation. The first thing Evan did was locate the real monument. He used a high-powered magnetic locator, sweeping it over the ground near the old oak tree. After a few minutes, it let out a high-pitched squeal. Evan knelt and scraped away the dirt and leaves. There it was. The top of the iron axle, buried in 1946. It was thick, rusted, and immovable. It was the anchor of truth. Evan set up his transit. A complex piece of equipment that looks like a telescope on a tripod, and centered it precisely over the axle. He took a reading, checking it against the coordinates in his field book. "Perfect," he muttered. "Right where God and the county surveyor left it." Then he sent me to the other end of the property with a survey rod, tall pole marked with measurements. Through a series of hand signals and shouted instructions, he guided me to the exact location of the second monument, the granite post. It was still there, solid and true, with his 2 known points established. He could now map every inch of the property line with absolute legal certainty. This is when the demonstration began. "First," Evan announced, his voice carrying in the still air, "let's run the true boundary line according to the official recorded plat." He sighted through his transit and directed. "Nate, who was holding the rod, along the precise path?" As Nate moved, I followed behind him, pushing small wooden stakes with bright pink flagging tape into the ground every 10 feet. We created a dotted line across the property, a perfect gentle curve that followed the high ground well away from the water. The pink flagged line ran a good 30 feet behind my picnic table. It passed the old oak tree and ended right at the granite post. It was exactly where it was supposed to be.
This is an abomination.
Marked in pink. Then came the master stroke. "Now," Evan said, a theatrical glint in his eye. "Let's see what Mr. Hale and his employer had in mind." He moved his transit, setting it up directly over the fake survey pin that Rob Hale had planted, the shiny, fraudulent piece of rebar. He sighted from that pin toward the nail Hale was about to hammer into my dock. He nodded to me. "Caleb, take that yellow string we found last night, tie it to the pin, and walk it over to the dock." Just like he did, I did as he asked. I stretched the bright yellow string across my lawn. The contrast was stunning. The yellow line of the fraud ran directly through the middle of my yard. It cut across the fire pit. It passed less than 5 feet from my back porch. It ended at the corner of my dock, slicing off the entire cove, the small beach where I launched my kayak, and a huge, valuable chunk of my property. Deputy Miller was writing furiously in his notepad. Dana Ruiz was taking pictures with her phone, documenting the whole thing. The visual was undeniable. On one side, you had the legitimate, historically recorded boundary marked in pink, based on established monuments and decades of legal record. On the other, you had the fraudulent yellow line, starting from a piece of rebar bought at a hardware store, designed with one purpose: to steal my land. I had already pulled out my phone. As soon as Hale had raised the hammer, I had dialed 911. The dispatcher was on the line. I spoke clearly and calmly, just as Dana had advised. "This is Caleb Morgan at 1120 Lakeside Drive. I have a trespasser on my property. He is being detained. He is secured. The hammer is on the ground. Please send a deputy." I gave them my name again and confirmed the address. No yelling, no panic, just the facts. Giving them clear information ensures a faster, more controlled response. While Nate kept Hale in place, I walked over and picked up the hammer. It was a standard 22-ounce framing hammer, heavy, capable of doing serious damage. I set it on the picnic table next to the can of spray paint and the ball of string he'd dropped. I kept the gloves on and didn't wipe it. Prints and trace would be intact for evidence. The tools of his trade. We didn't have to wait long. I could hear the sirens in the distance, growing steadily louder. A few minutes later, 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled into my driveway, their blue and red lights flashing across the trees and the side of my house. 2 deputies got out, their movements cautious but professional. They saw the scene, me standing by the table, Nate holding a subdued Hale, the yellow string stretching across my lawn like a bizarre party decoration. "What's going on here, Caleb?" One of the deputies, a guy named Miller, asked. I knew him from the local coffee shop. I pointed to Hale. "This is Rob Hale. I found him on my property, attempting to vandalize my dock and erect a fraudulent boundary line. When we confronted him, he assaulted us with this hammer. I laid it all out for them. The dispute with Karen Lawson, the nails and the bleach, the discovery of the fake pin, the stakeout. I showed them the infrared video on my phone, clear as day, showing Hale sneaking onto the property and setting up his string. I sent the full clip to Miller's body-worn camera account from my phone. He handed me an evidence receipt number. It was an open and shut case. They cuffed Hale, reading him his rights as he stared at the ground, his face a mixture of fear and humiliation. He didn't say a word. He knew he was caught. Dana Ruiz arrived just as they were putting Hale in the back of the cruiser. She took one look at the yellow string, the hammer, and the spray paint and shook her head. "Well, I guess he was about to cause another potential contamination," she said with a wry smile. The deputies collected the evidence, the hammer, the paint, the string. They photographed the fake pin in place, logged its GPS, tagged it as evidence, and left it undisturbed until a warrant could pull it. Every piece of it was another nail in Karen Lawson's coffin. As the cruisers pulled away, taking Hale with them, the yellow string was still tied to the fake pin, a flimsy, pathetic monument to their greed and stupidity. We had them. We had their man. We had their tools. And we had it all on camera. The lie was starting to come apart at the seams. The next morning, the lake was shrouded in a thick fog. It felt appropriate, as if the world was holding its breath. But we weren't waiting. It was time to move from defense to offense. It was time to bring the truth out into the blinding light of day. I called Evan Pike. "It's time, Evan," I said. "Bring your gear, all of it, and call the sheriff's department. Tell them we need a deputy present to witness an official survey." Evan understood immediately. We weren't just going to prove our case in court. We were going to prove it right here on the ground for everyone to see. We were going to create a demonstration so simple and so clear that no one could deny it. He tied the end of the string to the fake pin and started walking toward the lake, unspooling it as he went. He was heading for my dock. He was going to run his fake line right through the middle of my property. My anger, which I had kept cooled and banked, began to smolder. This was my home. This man was trespassing in the dead of night, acting on the orders of a petty tyrant to steal a piece of it. He was on my land with a hammer in his hand and larceny in his heart. Nate put a hand on my arm, silent signal. Wait, let him commit. It was the right move. We needed him to do more than just show up. We needed him to take a clear, undeniable action. Hale reached the edge of my lawn, the yellow string trailing behind him in a straight line from the fraudulent pin. He pulled the hammer from his belt loop. He looked back toward the woods, then at my dark, silent house. He thought he was alone. He thought he was invisible. He was wrong on both counts. He was the most watched man in the entire county. And in another minute, he was going to be the most surprised. The moment Rob Hale raised that hammer, he moved. He was standing at the corner of my dock, the yellow string pulled taut from the fake pin. His plan was obvious: drive a nail into the dock post, tie off the string, and create the first leg of his new imaginary boundary. Nate and I came out of the shadows like ghosts. We didn't run. We just walked, our footsteps silent on the soft grass. There's nothing more unnerving to a person who thinks they're alone than the sudden, quiet presence of someone else. We were about 15 feet away when I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the night's quiet hum. "That's far enough, Rob." He flinched. "Karen said quick in, quick out," he blurted, voice cracking. "Just string and paint? Then you brought a hammer," said. He looked past me, toward the pine ridge like someone might step in and save him. No one did. Hale froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. He spun around, his eyes wide with panic. The hammer was still in his hand, held halfway up. For a second, he just stared, his brain trying to process what was happening. He saw two dark figures emerging from the place where there was nothing. Just a moment before, his fight or flight instinct kicked in, and he made a bad choice. He chose fight. He let out a guttural yell and lunged, swinging the hammer wildly in a wide, clumsy arc. He wasn't aiming for my head. He was just trying to create space to scare us off so he could run. It was a move born of pure panic. He never had a chance. Nate moved with an economy of motion that was almost beautiful to watch. He stepped inside the arc of the swing, deflected Hale's arm with his left hand, and used his right to apply pressure to a point on Hale's wrist. It was a simple, practiced movement. Hale's fingers went limp, and the hammer clattered onto the dockboards. Nate continued the motion, spinning Hale around and locking his arm behind his back in a control hold. The entire scuffle, from the swing to the submission, took less than 3 seconds. It was over before it had even really begun. Hale stood there, breathing heavily, completely immobilized. There were no punches thrown, no wrestling match on the lawn. Just clean, quiet, and total control. "Stay still," Nate said, his voice low and calm. Right next to Hale's ear. "We have you on camera. The sheriff is on the way." "They'll be back," I said, thinking out loud. "They planted the pin. Now they have to use it. They'll try to run a line from it, mark trees, something to make it look official. They're arrogant. They think I'm just some guy who owns a lake house. That I'll get scared and hire a lawyer, and this will all get tied up in court for years. They're not expecting me to fight back with facts. Right here, right now." Nate, who had been listening quietly from the doorway, spoke up. "So we watch," he said. It wasn't a question. We set up, and we wait for them to come back and finish the job. Evan nodded slowly. "A stakeout. It's the only way to get them red-handed." Dana looked at us, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Legally, I can't participate in a civilian stakeout. But if you were to say, witness a crime in progress and call 911, the sheriff's department would have to respond. And if that crime happened to involve potential environmental contamination near the lake, I'd probably get a call too. I could be in the area, just on a routine patrol." The plan began to form, simple and clean. Nate knew security. He had spent years of his life in places where watching and waiting was the difference between life and death. He started talking about fields of fire, approach routes, and setting up a covert observation post. I had a couple of high-quality infrared trail cameras I use for watching wildlife. We could set them up to cover the trail in the area around the fake pin. "They'll come at night," Nate said. "Just before dawn, probably. They'll think everyone is asleep. They'll want to be gone by sunrise." I looked at my property, the trees my grandpa had planted, at the water that held so many of my best memories. The core question echoed in my mind: how far will a man go to defend his own? The answer was simple: as far as it takes. "All right," I said, rolling up the old map. "Let's get set up. Let's be ready for them when they come." Night fell over the lake. The moon was a sliver, offering just enough light to turn the familiar landscape into a world of shadows and suggestion. The air grew cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. There was no wind. Every sound carried: the slap of a small wave against the dock, the call of a loon from across the cove, the rustle of some small animal in the underbrush. Nate and I were tucked into a thicket of rhododendron bushes about 50 yards from the fake survey pin. He had a small thermal monocular, and I had a pair of night vision goggles. We were invisible, just two more shadows in a forest full of them. Evan was back at the house, monitoring the feeds from the 2 infrared cameras we'd set up. We had a simple radio channel to communicate. If he saw anything, he'd alert us. Waiting is a game of patience. It's a mental discipline. You have to shut down the part of your brain that wants to fidget, to talk, to do anything other than be still and observe. Nate was a master at it. He was as motionless as the rocks around us. I focused on my breathing, slowing it down, listening to the night. My mind drifted to my grandpa. He would have hated this. Not the fight itself, but the ugliness of it, the deceit. He believed in clear lines and honest dealings. He would have confronted Karen Lawson directly, man to man, so to speak. But this wasn't his time. This was my time. And my opponent wasn't an honest person. She was a schemer who sent minions to do her dirty work in the dark. So I had to fight her on my terms, with my methods, with proof. Hours passed. The stars wheeled overhead. Neighbor Tommy's beagle, who has an uncanny ability to bark at precisely the wrong moment, remained blessedly silent. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the radio in my ear crackled softly. It was Evan. "Got movement," he whispered. One person coming down the community trail, moving slow. My focus snapped into place. The waiting was over. I raised the night vision goggles. The world turned a ghostly green. I scanned the trail Nate and I had identified as the most likely approach route. Nothing. Then a flicker of movement. A man dressed in dark clothes was stepping carefully through the trees. He was trying to be quiet, but he was clumsy. He snapped a twig. He stumbled on a route. This was no professional. Nate had him in the thermal scope. "I see him," he breathed. "No weapons visible. He's carrying a small bag." The figure emerged from the trees and stopped near the fake pin. He pulled a flashlight from his pocket, but kept the beam pointed at the ground, using it sparingly. He was a thick-set man, with the heavy shoulders of someone used to physical labor. In the pale green glow of the night vision, I recognized him. Rob Hale. He was the HOA's designated handyman. The guy Karen always had doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Her fixer. He looked around, a nervous, furtive energy about him. He clearly didn't want to be here. He was just a tool, a hammer in Karen's hand. Hale knelt by the pin. He reached into his bag and pulled out a ball of bright yellow string. Then came a can of orange spray paint. And finally, a heavy framing hammer. The pieces clicked into place. This was it. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. He was here to make the fake boundary look real. He was going to run a string line, mark trees, and create a visible physical border that Karen could point to. It was brazen. It was fraudulent. And we were about to watch him do it. The fake pin was their big mistake. They had given me a starting point, a tangible piece of their plan that I could now unravel. They thought they were building a case. What they were really doing was building their own cage. Evan Pike arrived an hour later, his old truck rattling down my driveway. He didn't look like a man who could dismantle a legal argument with a plumb bob and a field book, but he was. He had a gray beard that had seen more seasons than most of the trees on my property, and eyes that were used to squinting at distant objects and fine details. He didn't say much at first. He just walked the scene, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked at the bag of nails, sniffed the air by the dock, and then spent a long time staring at the fake survey pin. He circled it like a wolf studying a trap. Finally, he knelt, pulling a small magnifying glass from his vest pocket. He examined the plastic cap, the hammer marks on the rebar, the disturbance in the soil around it. He grunted. It was a sound that contained a whole paragraph of professional disgust. "Amateur," he finally said. Standing up and dusting off his knees, "Look at the soil. It's too loose. A real pin, one that's been in the ground for years, the earth settles around it. This was put in last night. And this cap," he tapped it with his finger, "it's a generic. No surveyor's license number, no company name. State standards require a license number stamped on permanent caps. This one has none. It's a scarecrow, meant to look like the real thing from a distance, but up close, it's just junk on a stick." He looked at me. "They're trying to build a narrative, Caleb. They create a dispute by planting this thing. Then they use it to justify their land grab. It's an old trick. As dumb as it is old, we walked back to my porch, and I laid out the big, cloth-backed survey map my grandpa had framed. It hung in my study, a constant reminder of the property's history. Evan ran a finger along the boundary line, a thick black line that followed the curve of the cove. "Here," he said, tapping a small X on the map near the big oak tree. "Iron axle. That's the primary monument for this corner." His finger slid to the other side of the property. "Granite post. Those are your anchors. They're in the county record. They're in the state archives. They are, legally speaking, the beginning and the end of the argument." He pulled out his own field book, a worn, leather-bound volume filled with decades of notes and measurements. He flipped through the pages, the paper soft with age. "Here we are, August 1998. I was here with your granddad. We reshot the whole line just to be sure. Found the axle, found the post, tied it all into the county grid. It's as solid as the bedrock it's sitting on." He looked up from the book, his eyes sharp. "This Karen Lawson, she's not just wrong. She's committing fraud. Filing a false document or knowingly using a fraudulent survey monument is a felony in this state." Dana. Ruiz had finished her work at the dock. She came up to the porch holding the water sample kit. "The bleach is already dissipating, but I got enough for a report. It's a clear violation of the state's Clean Water Act. Not a huge one, but enough for a citation and a fine. Add that to the vandalism and the illegal dumping of the nails, and you've got a nice little package." I looked from Evan's map to Dana's report. We had the pieces. The motive was the land grab. The method was intimidation and fraud. We had the evidence of the damage in Evan's expert opinion on the fake pin, but we were missing one critical piece. We needed to catch them in the act. We needed to connect Karen Lawson and her plan directly to the person who was hammering nails and stakes into my property in the middle of the night. That morning, the lake was telling me something was wrong. I felt it before I saw it. A wrongness in the air. The first sign was on the trail. A scatter of roofing nails, sharp points up, half hidden in the pine needles. Not dropped by accident. Placed deliberately spaced out right where a bare foot or a dog's paw would find them. I stopped dead, my eyes scanning the ground. My heart rate didn't spike. It just settled into a low, steady thrum. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was an attack. I spent the next 20 minutes on my hands and knees with a magnetic sweeper, the kind mechanics use to find drop screws. The little clicks of the nails hitting the magnet were tiny notes in a song of petty malice. I collected more than 50 of them. 50 chances to injure me, or Nate, or neighbor, Tommy, who sometimes walks his beagle down this way. Put them in a plastic bag. Evidence. I filmed the sweep on my phone with a timestamp on and wore gloves so the print stayed clean. Always collect the evidence. Then I got to the dock. The smell hit me first. A acrid chemical. The sharp, clean scent of bleach. Someone had poured it all over the wooden decking, leaving pale, ugly streaks where it had stripped the stain. The wood was still damp. It was meant to make the docks slick, dangerous, and it was a direct message. We can get to your boat. We can get to your water. The bleach had run down into the lake, leaving a faint, milky cloud in the still water, by the pilings, a violation not just of my property, but of the lake itself. A thin buzz rose over the trees. A hobby drone drifted above the cove, camera gimbal blinking red. It hovered, tilted, and traced the dock like a vulture. I lifted my phone and filmed it, panning to the posted "No trespassing. No drones over property line" sign at my fence. The drone jerked, climbed, and shot back toward the HOA path. I saved the clip and emailed it to myself. Timestamp GPS, angle to the dock, locked. It wasn't a felony by itself, but it proved a pattern. Monitoring, intimidation. And angles only the HOA trail could give. That's when I called Dana Ruiz. Dana is the county game warden. She's a state wildlife officer assigned to our county and works with the water quality unit. She's all business with a sharp eye for detail and a deep, abiding hatred for people who mess with her lake. Pollution is high on her list of unforgivable sins. I explained the situation calmly, factually. The nails, the bleach. The conversation with Karen Lawson the day before. She was silent for a moment on the other end of the line. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. "Don't touch anything else." While I waited, I did another visual sweep of the area, and that's when I saw it. The thing that turned this from simple vandalism into calculated fraud, it was a survey pin. A piece of rebar, maybe 18 inches long, hammered into the ground about 10 feet from the water's edge. It was topped with a bright orange plastic cap. It was positioned right where Karen had gestured the day before, claiming the new boundary was. I walked over to it, my boots crunching on the gravelly soil. I didn't touch it. I just looked. My grandpa and I had walked this property line 100 times. I knew where the original monuments were. There was a big iron axle buried by the old oak and a granite marker on the far side of the cove. They were old, weathered, and absolutely, unequivocally in the right place. This new pin was an imposter. The rebar was clean, with only a few scratches from the hammer used to drive it in. The plastic cap was shiny, the lettering on it crisp and new. It screamed fake. It was a plant, a piece of manufactured evidence designed to support Karen's ridiculous claim. This was her expert, a hammer and a piece of steel wielded in the dark. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. And it was proof. Not the proof she wanted, but the proof I needed. Dana pulled up in her Greene County truck just as I was taking pictures of the pin with my phone, careful to get the background, the timestamp, everything. She got out, her face set in a grim line. She looked at the bleach-damaged dock, took a water sample, and then stared at the nails I'd collected. "This is garbage, Caleb," she said, shaking her head. "This is amateur intimidation." I pointed to the new pin. "That's the main event, Dana. The rest is just noise. That's a fraudulent monument. They're trying to literally create a new property line out of thin air." She crouched down and looked at the pin, her eyes missing nothing. Freshly driven. No oxidation on the rebar. Cap's brand new. She stood up. "You need a surveyor to document this officially." I nodded. "I've already got a call in to the best there is." I knew exactly who I needed. I needed Evan Pike, not as a picnic guest, but as a professional. I phoned him again and asked him to return with his gear and license to document it officially. Evan's a licensed state surveyor. His seal makes the measurements courtroom ready. I needed his transit, his records, and his lifetime of experience to dismantle this lie piece by piece. I just looked at her. Nate had stopped flipping the burgers. Even Evan, a man who had seen his share of nonsense, had lowered his drink and was staring. I know water law. I know it better than my own reflection. I know the difference between accretion, the slow buildup of land in avulsion, a sudden change from a flood, and I know that even with avulsion, the legal boundary line doesn't just jump. It stays put unless courts and surveyors get involved over many years. What she was describing was a fantasy. A land grab dressed up in cheap legal jargon she'd probably found on the internet. That's an interesting theory. "Karen," I said, my voice as dry as old firewood, "but it's not how water law works. The boundary is fixed by the original survey plat. It doesn't migrate because of a heavy spring rain. If water moves fast in one hit, The map line stays the same. Only slow natural buildup can change it. She gave a dismissive little laugh. We have our own experts. They disagree. The green belt needs to be extended for community access. This is no longer your private picnic area. It's a public thoroughfare. She pointed at the cooler of drinks. You'll need to move your personal effects. Step away from my guests. Karen, this is my private land. Nate took a step forward. He's not a big man, but he has a presence. He radiates a kind of compressed energy, and when he focuses it on you, it's like standing in front of a blast furnace. Ma'am, I think you're mistaken, he said, his voice dangerously polite. Karen's eyes flickered toward him. A brief moment of uncertainty before her arrogance reasserted itself. This doesn't concern you? This is an official HOA matter. I put a hand on Nate's arm. It's fine, Nate. I turned back to Karen. I needed to stick to the proof. Karen, I have the original deed, the survey from 1946, and a subsequent survey Evan did in 1998. They all show the line is at the old oak tree, 20 feet behind where you're standing. The high water mark is a reference, not a rolling boundary on this lake. Evan Pike cleared his throat. He had that look on his face, the one that said he was about to educate someone, whether they liked it or not. She's conflating riparian law for navigable rivers with the platted lakeside boundaries we have here. It's a common and very convenient mistake. He said it calmly. Like he was explaining why the sky is blue. Karen's smile tightened until it was just a line. She was not used to being contradicted, especially not by people who actually knew what they were talking about. Her power came from bullying people who didn't. We'll see what the board's lawyers have to say. I'm just giving you a friendly warning, Caleb. You're encroaching. We're going to take steps to reclaim our community property. She turned, her back rigid, and marched back up the trail. We all stood there for a moment in silence. The sizzle of the grill suddenly very loud. Friendly warning, Nate said. That was about as friendly as a rattlesnake giving you a little buzz before it strikes. Nate looked at me. What was that all about? I watched her disappear into the trees. That, I said, was the beginning of a very predictable fight. I knew then, with a cold certainty that settled in my gut, that her friendly warning wasn't the end of it. It was just the opening move, and her next one wouldn't be a conversation. The next morning, the 4th of July haze had burned off, leaving the air clean and sharp. I believe in routines. They ground you. My routine is a cup of black coffee and a walk down the trail to the dock, just to check on the boat and see what the lake is doing. It's a ritual my grandpa taught me. The lake talks to you, he'd say. You just have to be quiet enough to listen. I recently faced a lake owner's worst nightmare. The HOA president marched down to my dock and ordered my guests to leave. And her excuse? She said the shoreline had moved into HOA land. Funny thing is, the only thing that froze that day was her smile when I said, "This is my private land. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Caleb Morgan. The lake is my home. Not just the house, but the water, the trees, the rocky shoreline. My grandpa showed me how to walk without slipping. He left me this place. He also left me a piece of advice. People will always try to take what is beautiful." He said it with a calm certainty, the same way he'd point out a base hiding under a lily pad. He wasn't being cynical. He was just stating a fact of nature, like gravity or erosion. I've always been a man who prefers facts. I like things you can measure, things you can prove. I studied water law for that very reason. It's all about lines, deeds, and historical records. There's no room for feelings or opinions. The line is where the line is, period. So when trouble came to my shore, it didn't come as a storm or a flood. It came on a sunny 4th of July, wearing a crisp polo shirt and a tight, unpleasant smile. It came in the form of Karen Lawson. The grill was smoking, sending the scent of burgers and hot dogs across the yard. My best friend Nate, an ex-Marine who moves with a quiet efficiency that can be unsettling if you don't know him, was manning the tongs. My grandpa's old surveyor buddy, Evan Pike, was sitting in a lawn chair, a cool drink in his hand, telling a story about mapping a swamp back in the 70s. The sun was warm, The lake was a sheet of blue glass, and for a moment, everything was exactly as it should. B. That's usually when the universe decides to throw a wrench in the works. I saw her coming down the trail that separates my property from the HOA's manicured community greenbelt. Karen Lawson, president of the Lakeview Meadows Homeowners Association. She walked like she owned the air everyone else was breathing. She had a clipboard, which is never a good sign. She jabbed a finger toward our table like she was calling fouls at a game she invented. In my experience, nothing good ever comes from a person in a position of minor authority carrying a clipboard. Caleb, she said. It wasn't a question or a greeting. It was an announcement of her presence. We need to talk about your boundary. I took a slow sip of my water. I don't drink when I need to think clearly. Karen, happy 4th. There's nothing to talk about. The boundary is where it's been for 80 years. I kept my voice even calm. Getting angry is like giving your opponent a map of your weaknesses. She tapped her pen on the clipboard. The sound was like a woodpecker on a metal pole. Annoying and persistent. That's where you're mistaken. Due to the recent high water levels and subsequent erosion, the shoreline has shifted. The ordinary high water mark, which defines your property line, has moved inland. She made a grand sweeping gesture that included my picnic table, my dock, and half my lawn. This entire section is now officially HOA common area. She raised her voice. Everyone in the water, out now. Kayaks to shore? Coolers off the grass. This area is HOA common use as of today. Kids froze mid-laugh. One little kayak bumped the dock. Karen lifted her clipboard like a badge. Compliance check commencing, she said into her phone. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't touch my guests, I said. A mom pulled her child close. Nate set the tongs down. The metal CLINKED. Karen stepped onto my grass, her heel grinding a divot. Names, addresses. I will be issuing citations. Step back to the trail, Nate said. Calm, she smirked. Or what? Or you're trespassing, I said. And I will document every second.